Okay, I think we have enough people, so I'm going to go ahead and start the webinar and get us going. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Environment and Climate Committee meeting for February 11th. We'll start today with a roll call. So first we have Bill Welch.
Hi there. You obviously see I don't have video. I'm out in Summer Lake, so I'm trying to do a hotspot, but I'm here. So don't say anything bad about me, okay?
Thanks, Bill. Kavi Chakshi.
Here.
Kelly Jensen.
Here.
Percy Marion.
Here.
Mark Buckley. Neil Bonsgard.
Here.
Peter Grube.
Here.
Rory Isbell. And Serena Dietrich.
Here.
And Tess Gardner.
Here.
And then we do have two of our new ex officios today, so we'll include them in the roll call. We have Ann Berkey.
Here.
And Sasha Sulia. Okay, thank you. And I think we are expecting all of the people that aren't here yet to attend, so hopefully they show up soon. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, are you all able to see my slideshow? Perfect. Okay, so for the agenda today, we're actually going to do a round of introductions because we do have a couple of new people with us today. We have our new ex officio members. We'll hopefully be joined by our new council liaison, Councilor Barb Campbell. And we also have the city manager, Eric King, with us today, who's going to give a guest presentation. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to do just a quick round of introductions. We'll approve meeting minutes and do a public comment. And then our first main item today is that Eric is going to give a presentation that's kind of an overview of city and council priorities. We'll do some updates. We will do our chair and vice chair elections today. And then we'll wrap up by talking about the CCAP action matrix that I sent out, and then also just having a discussion on where you all want to go, kind of restarting that discussion we started last week about next steps for the committee and the CCAP. So for introductions, I'll actually go, I'll stop sharing my screen again so that we can see each other a little bit better. Oh.
I just wanted to mention, Cassie, Mark put something in the chat.
Thank you. I have to figure out how to stop sharing my screen because something is different. Are Kayla or Ian or Eric, have you guys seen this like a slightly different Zoom? Oh, pause share. Okay, sorry, I upgraded my Zoom app, so it's a little bit different. It looks like Mark, I need to just promote to a panelist. So Mark, you should be able to join now and use your video and speak.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, you know, I couldn't find I don't think I ever got did everyone get a separate Zoom link for this meeting? I did. Okay. Yeah, I went through all my email. I didn't. So, okay.
Hey, I had a hard time too, Mark, quickly. It shows up if you look up under panelist. It doesn't show up as ECC as in when I searched it that way.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps.
And then Rory Isbell is also having internet problems, but will be on as soon as he gets them figured out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I've also just upgraded Councilor Campbell to a panelist as well.
And broadband is down at my house. I was able to use my fancy city councilor connection, but there may be other people with problems. Hi,
Okay,
everybody.
perfect.
Hello, ECC.
Thank you. Councilor Campbell, you're joining at a great time because we're actually just going to do a quick round of introductions since we do have a couple of new people today. So for introductions, we'll just go around and just share your name and just like super, super brief, just maybe a couple of words of kind of what brings you to the ECC, maybe your personal or professional connection to the topic. So let's just go in the order of the roll call. So we'll start with Bill.
I thought I'd just put video on here for a second. I don't know if I'm coming through okay. I'm on a hotspot. So anyway, so Bill Welch, and my background is in energy efficiency and renewables. I worked for an electric utility for 21 years running those programs. And before that was an energy manager for a large industrial facility in Texas. So I'm here because, well, and I'm also on the regional technical forum for the Power Council. So I've had an interest in this for a long time and want to see us carry through on the climate action plan in Bend.
Kavi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kavi Choksi. I have background in marketing and entrepreneurship, so I think it's more of the unique experience here. And recently, so taking action on climate change has been one of my passions, especially in the last couple of years. And I also have experience on political campaigns. So I worked on Jimmy McLeod-Skinner's campaign and also Jason Krupp's campaign recently. So I'm excited to be part of this too.
Kelly.
Kelly Jensen. I have about 15, 16 years in supply chain management where I've been focused on sustainable sourcing and creating second life opportunities for products across the marketplace. And what brings me to this committee, my interest is further developing my community here in Bend and being part of a positive change on the topic that's most important to my career and my personal interests.
Kersey.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Mary, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I used to work at Commute Options, a nonprofit here working on transportation. I'm now the Strategic Partnership Director for Oregon Green Schools. So my passion's in environmental ed and bringing a lot of equity and equity lens to this committee as well.
Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Buckley. I'm an economist with Echo Northwest. I lead our natural resource and climate group, and my work is generally trying to bring an empirical approach to public policy decisions. So how do we allocate resources in the environment and climate realm using data and technical analysis? Thanks.
Neil.
Yeah, Neil Bonsgaard. I work at the Environmental Center here in Bend and focus primarily on transportation and building efficiency. And yeah, so those are two big categories for this work. I'm excited about it.
Peter.
Hey, good morning still, I think. I'm Peter Grube. I'm a small business owner here in Bend, working for about 15 years in the energy efficiency, residential construction, sustainable building space. Been engaged in the community over the years with City Club and affordable housing committees, and just trying to do my part to be intentional about growing Bend's growth and doing it in a sustainable way.
Rory.
Hi, everyone. And sorry I was late. I had some internet problems there, but happy to be here. My name's Rory Isbell. I'm an attorney. I work for a local environmental nonprofit, Central Oregon Land Watch. My background's in law and also in land use planning. And I also serve on the board of the Citizens Utility Board of Oregon, so have an interest in consumer advocacy and energy issues.
Serena.
Hi, Serena Dietrich. I currently work for myself, but spent many years working in the commercial sustainability space with businesses, high-level community and sustainable strategies for corporations. And I also serve on the sustainability board for the state of Oregon. So very deeply involved in all the interactions, both statewide and locally.
And Tess.
Morning. I'm an alternative non-voting member on this committee, but my background's in environmental resources management, specifically water, at least recently. I work for a small consulting firm here in Bend called AMP Insights, and just bringing that sort of background to this very diverse group.
Thanks. And then we have now our newer members. We have Anne.
Hi, I'm Ann Berkey. I am a facilities supervisor with the Bend LaPine Schools. I manage our strategic energy management program that is run through the Energy Trust of Oregon. And I also I go out and I look for energy efficient upgrades that we can do to all of our schools and our operations buildings. So any kind of lighting, HVAC. I work with Oregon Department of Energy through the Senate Bill 1149 program, as well as ETO. So that's my, I believe that's why I was asked to come on this, just to partner with the Bend LaPine Schools.
Thanks, Anne, and thanks for joining us. And then we have Sasha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sasha Salea. I work for Bend Park and Recreation District. My title is Superintendent of Park Operations, but basically I oversee all of the maintenance and operations for our parks, trails, and facilities. So I'm involved with a little bit of everything when it comes to energy use, and then also our other environmental concerns such as water use and garbage. So I think that's why I'm here, but I'm also here because I was on the CCAP committee for the district. And I'm really happy to see this group, and I'm glad that it's broad and not just dealing with the CCAP. I mean, it's really important that we're finally moving on those initiatives, but I was happy to see that it's taking a broader breadth of environmental issues for the entire community and area. Before coming to I'll just put this also in there because my passion is natural resources. Before coming to the Park District, I worked for the Forest Service for 15 years. I was a forester. So I really do have a passion for, wildlife and fisheries and forestry and all of those resources. So happy to meet everyone. I'm glad to be on this committee.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Sasha. And Councilor Campbell, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hi, everybody. What an amazing group. I am so excited. I was there for the very beginning of our climate work, fighting to get things underway. And then when the committee was formed, it was just too many of us fighting to see who got to be. So now it's me, and I couldn't be more excited. My own background, I studied science in college. I've got a degree in biology with a minor, I got a double degree in biology and psychology, and then a minor in chemistry. And wow, I think maybe biology and psychology is exactly what we need to have together to do this work. I taught science in Burns Hines. I would tell those kids some days, I would say, well, tree hugging, dirt loving liberal that I am. And I promise you, their eyes would just get huge. You are, Miss Campbell? Like they'd never even, seen an actual, liberal with their own eyes. And one of the things I would tell them, they would say, well, Miss Campbell, the ocean level isn't going to come up to 3,000 feet. We're at 3,000 feet. We'll be safe. What do we? And I'm like, oh yeah. And I'd pull down the map and I'd start going around the country of all the big cities that are at sea level. And I'd say, they're all going to move here. And that would just terrify them, completely terrify them. The idea that Burns, do you want Burns to turn into Bend? That was the other thing that I could just absolutely terrify them with. So I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for all your work up until now, and I'll stop talking.
Thanks, Councilor Campbell. That was a great story, and we're very excited to have you as our new council liaison. So we're looking forward to working with you. And then last, Eric, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Barb's a hard act to follow. I always love how you put things into such simple like terms and storytelling. It's brilliant. Thank you, Barb. I also have a degree in economics and sociology, undergrad, and then a master's in planning, and that all kind of like in a weird way sort of fits together. But I've been in Bend for about 14 years, most of that as the city manager. Prior to that, I worked for the city of Portland. Just excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so that wraps up our intro. So our next order of business, let me actually just restart my screen share. Our next order of business is to approve the meeting minutes. So does anyone want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, looks like we have everyone. Thank you. And then next we have public comment. So for anyone who is an attendee right now that would like to make a comment to the committee, if you have a comment, please use the raised hand function by clicking on the raised hand icon that you should see. And then I will call your name and provide you the ability to unmute your microphone based on the order that the hands were raised. And then if you're calling in, you can just press *9 to raise your hand.
Cassie, is anyone else getting feedback?
I hear a little bit. Could everyone, I guess, just put themselves on mute if you're not on mute? Okay, that seemed to take care of it. Perfect. So it looks like we have two comments. First, we have Patricia. So Patricia, I am allowing you to speak right now. So you should be able to unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks so much, first of all, for all your work. I greatly admire the Environment and Climate Initiative, and I realize this is volunteer time, and I'm a citizen of Bend. I actually first moved here in 1981 after attending university in California, where I got a degree in biology from UC Berkeley. I lived here for a few years and worked for Bend Research, which is now Lonza, and went over to Portland to do my graduate work in biomedical research. I moved back to Bend in about 2011, and in 2016, I actually purchased a home here while I was still working part-time down in on contract work down in California. When I first moved to Bend, California had been experiencing a major drought, and there were severe restrictions on water use. And when I came to Bend, being surrounded by all this great fresh water and having access to water sports, was just so, and beautiful green gardens in summer was just really enjoyable. And winter also provided great skiing with a great snowpack. One year I skied into May, which was just remarkable to be up on the mountain skiing in the middle of May. In 2016, I purchased a house here to settle down for good. And this was a new development up off of O.B. Riley Road, developed by Hayden, one of the major developers, community developers in Bend, along with Polish. The landscaping and irrigation was designed and installed by Hayden, and mostly non-native plants and lots of grass. The front yards are required to be 50% grass. And there's also a very large curb strip, which is 10 feet wide by at least 40 feet in front of each house. And the homeowners are required to water this lawn. It serves no purpose really other than just landscaping, and it's just green lawn. A neighbor and I last year approached our HOA and requested to put in low maintenance landscaping or no, water-free landscaping into our curb strip, and we were denied. It was part of the rules of the HOA. This has become an issue, as we know, this summer when I heard Wickiup Reservoir ran dry. Prineville Reservoir was so low they couldn't launch boats into it. It was shocking from when I moved here in the 1980s to realize that the lakes were actually drying up. And furthermore, part of that was that the snowpack was relatively low last year and ran off quickly due to warm weather. And that leaves us at the end of summer with much lower levels in the river, which is our main source. Well, Tumalo Creek actually is our main source of water, as you know. So this is my concern, is that I have some suggestions to put on the table of water conservation as part of the initiative of this group. I know it's climate control, but climate global warming is certainly going to add to the water issue in Bend, that given that we rely so heavily on snowpack and the rivers. First of all, the home builder company.
And Patricia, I'm really sorry to interrupt. We do typically limit comments to 2 to 3 minutes, and we are a little bit over that right now. I'm sorry I didn't share that at the beginning. I should have. So if you could maybe just wrap up your comment in the next 30 seconds or so.
Yes, I wasn't going to go on much longer. I have some recommendations. First of all, I'd like home builder companies to be educated, and perhaps the city could look into requiring a certain percentage of landscaping that is includes native plants and low maintenance. Can the city develop a water use awareness program for homeowners, just to help them realize that water is not free here and it's limited to the development of new golf courses, and then finally a demonstration garden in the city for low water landscape and establish plants as part of an education program. I'm done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next we have Anders. So Anders, I'm allowing you to talk, and you should be able to unmute. And also 2 to 3 minutes. If you could keep your comments within 2 to 3 minutes would be great. Thank you.
All right, don't wax on poetically. Okay, my name is Anders Carlson, and I'm a co-founder of the Oregon Glaciers Institute. And first off, I'd like to commend Bend and this committee for taking issues of climate change seriously and really moving forward in a way I've not seen of before. And echoing the last commenter, I wanted to approach you from about not only looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and going carbon neutral, but thinking about resiliency planning. And water resources will become an issue for Bend if it's not already. The direct concern for Bend is your drinking water comes from Tumalo Creek, and that's headwater is in Crook Glacier on Broken Top. And that glacier is diminishing and dwindling, and nobody's monitoring or observing it. When that glacier goes, the biggest threshold will be is you're going to lose 0 degrees C water, freezing water going into Tumalo Creek, which will then warm the creek up, and you might start approaching fish habitable thresholds and start losing drinking water access. So this is a short 3 minutes here, but it would be great if we could talk further at some point about OGI's mission of monitoring glacier change in the Oregon Cascades and looking at how we can best then preserve and protect this water resource and into the future, so that Bend can have this be a sustainable community. Right now, Bend is a desert town that has a good water drinking source from the snow melt and glacier melt in the mountains, similar to what like Tucson or Reno are like. But if you lose that snowpack and that rain and that glacier melt as a water source, you might be becoming more like Phoenix, or Vegas, which are not sustainable towns. So just a brief introduction here, but please check us out at the Oregon Glaciers Institute. You can Google us, and we have op-ed we wrote a year ago in the Bend Source, and we are around. So please reach out to us, and I would encourage this committee to think about also sustainable and solutions and resiliency planning in addition to curbing greenhouse gas emissions. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. So that looks like all of our public comments for today, so we'll move on. And for those who raised their hand during public comment, if you could just click the hand icon again to lower your hand when you're done, thanks. So next, I invited Eric here today to give you all an overview on just really how the city and the council work in the big picture and what the big priorities are and kind of areas of work are for the city. We're also in the middle of council goal setting for the new biennium, so he'll share an update on kind of how that's starting to shape up. And Councilor Campbell, if there's anything you'd like to share after Eric's presentation with respect to council goals, that would be great to hear too. And this was just in response to a couple of requests from the first few meetings where some of you expressed that you just like a little bit more context on kind of what the city's priorities are and how this work fits in and just kind of how the city works as a whole. So I thought it would be a really good opportunity as you all start to develop your own priorities to just understand how it kind of best aligns and fits in with the rest of the work the city's doing. So Eric, we appreciate you being willing to visit with us today, and I'll just turn it over to you, and I'll just let me know when you want me to flip through the slide, flip the slide.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Cassie, and thanks for I'm really happy to be here and provide a little bit of context on the how. So I'm not going to focus too much on the what. Really, that's the role of our boards and committees, like the Environment and Climate Committee, is to help our policymakers, our city council, really stay focused on the right things. And this backdrop, this slide, really kind of puts that into focus, where the Mount Bachelor backdrop kind of represents the city's core services. We are as local government, what's called a full service, meaning that we provide infrastructure, water, roads, sewer. Layered on top of that, police and fire services. Layered on top of that is our governance system, whereby we want to make sure that we're following state law, but also being transparent with our community members on the services that they're getting. So all the administrative support that it takes to run this organization. Layered on top of that, land entitlement. It's kind of a fancy word of saying, let's make sure as we grow that we have a sufficient amount of supply of land, but also that we're using that land efficiently through good planning. And then all the way down to that built environment, making sure that our buildings are up to code. And then once something is built, that it's in conformance with our municipal code, keeping an orderly, clean city. Layered on top of that is our economic development efforts, making sure that as we grow, that we are growing in a sustainable fashion, that our economy is becoming more and more diverse. So those of you that are familiar with Bend's history, we have this history of being kind of a one-trick pony back in the day, of being kind of a town based on natural resources. That kind of dwindled in the 1980s, and then developments and construction and tourism, I think, have been dominant forces in our economic sectors, and we've been trying really hard to always diversify that economy and create a community that is long lasting, that is not so subjected to the booms and busts that Bend has been in the past. And those clouds in this backdrop really represent community values. And a lot of those values are around, as we are a growing community, let's make sure that we don't lose sight of what's really important to us as human beings. And so we talk about environmental justice and the beautiful environment that we all came here for. Let's make sure that that's being preserved. And so the Climate Action Plan is a great example of that, but it's broader than that. I mean, to me, that Climate Action Plan covers many of these value sets, is what I would sort of call the clouds. Social justice as well. Again, great intersection there. As we grow, let's make sure all voices are being heard, and let's making sure that Bend is truly living up to being a welcoming community. So there is a big focus right now on equity, and that's happening throughout not just the organization, but this region. We're coordinating with our partners in a collective impact model with schools and parks and libraries to amplify that even further. Housing and homelessness strategies. We want to make sure that Bend is a place that everybody can live and get access to decent housing. That's not the case right now. We've got a huge disparity of what, based on kind of what the average wage is and average home price. And so a lot of work going on right now with affordable housing and then more specifically in getting our unhoused folks in a more safe and secure situation. And of course, our business climate, we have a strategic plan for kind of attracting targeted sectors, et cetera. And then heritage is the sense of place that we all have. And it's different for everybody. I think some folks might use the word livability, which is not a word I love to use because that's a little too broad, but it's this sense of, as we grow, let's not lose sight of some of the things that make Bend special and preserve, whether it be historic landmarks or just those special places that we all kind of hold dear within our neighborhoods, our downtown, et cetera. And so those value sets tend to be where we form our boards and committees. So we have an Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Peter mentioned he was part of that. The Environment and Climate Committee, this newly formed group, that's front and center. We are in the process of forming a Human Rights and Equity Commission on some of the social justice values that are there. We have a Neighborhood Leadership Alliance representing all the 13 neighborhood associations in that sort of heritage place of helping us make sure that we're growing in a balanced fashion. So it's this whole sort of governance system of our job at the city is to deliver those core services while making sure that we're tethered to those values. And so we use a mechanism, if you go to the next slide, through council goal setting as the way to sort of drive that home. And we use this iceberg analogy to tell that story of saying most of what the community sees and what really council as an elected body representing the community, they're there to draw out those values and those issues that the community cares about and help us as an organization execute and develop action plans through good goal setting. So as Cassie mentioned, we're just right in the middle of that process right now. We do this on 2-year cycles to align with council election cycles, as well as we do a 2-year budget, a biennial budget. And our budget period starts July 1st through June 30th. So we're in the middle of this planning effort right now, all leading up to a budget that gets approved by council in June of this year, and then our fiscal year starts July 1st. So many of you were participants in, or this body was a participant in the goal setting process. So we opened that up in a pretty intentional way of inviting our boards and committees and our community partners to a listening session that took place on January 11th. We had, I think, over 200 ideas that were presented to City Council, representing over 40, 50, maybe upwards of 50 organizations just here in Bend. So we're so fortunate to have such an engaged community. That's also coupled with, we do statistically valid surveys. We had some specific engagement efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a report that also helped to provide a kind of a key input. And just, of course, comments that we get, just like this committee meeting. People come to council meetings and share their thoughts. All that sort of gets in the mixing bowl, and council then starts to create their goals, strategies, and actions. And we're in the middle of that right now. So that city council goals that helps inform our citywide strategic plan, which then we don't stop there. There's departments, so police and fire and our water utilities or community developments. They also have department specific plans that we're all trying to create that line of sight so that we're reflecting those community values all the way down to that individual level. So we have performance evaluations as most organizations, and we have specific goals for employees that help all move us towards actions and results that reflect those values. So that's kind of how the system works. And again, it's on this sort of 2-year cycle. I want to talk a little bit about the what and kind of the council goals of what we're operating under currently. And then I'll give you a sneak preview of what is on the docket and how things are shaping up, and then how that specifically connects to the Environment and Climate Committee here in a moment. But before I do, I just want to see if there's any questions in anything that I just said before I do that.
Could I just make a little comment? Do you mind going back to the Mount Bachelor slide? We're always trying for metaphors or ideas that help make really complicated issues understandable, frankly. This one, I like this one. I think this is a good one, that, these things that are on Mount Bachelor, those are, this is the solid rock of the city. These are the things that do not change day to day to day, or year to year even. And I just want to make sure everybody understands the clouds, they're not in any way unimportant. Depicting them as clouds is not at all saying they're less important than the things that are on the mountain. They're just things that don't necessarily fall under our core services, and they kind of come and go depending on the community. So right now, I would say to you that social justice and housing and homeless strategies have rained down upon Mount Bachelor. Mount Bachelor is covered with a couple of feet of snow in the form of environmental justice and homelessness strategies. And that has to do with the current city council and what they heard when they were campaigning. So I just want to make that comment that, all of these things are important. It's just and then the other thing is how homelessness strategies, it just is usually under the county's purview rather than the cities. Their funding comes there, but we've all decided this is it's a community problem. It is a nationwide problem. We've all got to join in. And the same thing with environmental justice, which is what you're doing. That's everyone. The fact that it's up on a cloud doesn't mean it's not important. It just means it's absolutely everyone. That cloud is raining down upon all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Barb. Bill,
Cassie,
do you have a
looks like
question?
yeah, there was another question.
Yeah, this is Bill. Yeah, I do have a question. So it's kind of a pragmatic one. So looking at the climate action plan and the matrix that we're going to go over later, there's a lot of items on there that are city led. And I'm just curious, we're describing the planning and budgeting process, and how do we avoid getting out of sync with recommendations that we might be making with the planning, since the budget's going to be set in June? I'm just curious of how we stay ahead of the game here and make sure we can get things done.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's exactly why we spend a good 6 months doing that planning work. So I know as a committee, you all met early in January, and it was a quick turnaround time to be able to take this big body of work, this climate action plan, and say, okay, over the next 2 years, let's be practical of this big plan. What are some things that we see as areas needing focus? And the plan also helped to inform some of those prioritization, that prioritization of where to start. So that information was shared with council, and council has taken that, and we're not going to share it today because it's still being developed. Barb is part of a smaller group of council that we're really getting into the nuts and bolts, but rest assured, those issues that are in the climate action plan that you all talked about are part of council goals. And what that does then is, once they're in that framework of those goals, that then drives the resources. So then I just came out of a meeting this morning where we are allocating some certain funding. Cassie will be happy to know there's some additional funding that will be provided in the organization to help advance some of those specific actions in the climate action plan. So it does all get tied together through that budget development process. All right, so I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Cassie, advancing to 2 slides to the current council goals. So I think it's a somewhat foundational. These areas, these 4 areas, more or less represent those core services in that Mount Bachelor. And even moving forward, a lot of this will stay pretty consistent. So economic vitality is currently this broad area where we have natural resource stewardship, or that kind of triple bottom line approach. It's embedded in economic vitality, which is kind of meant to say, as we grow, let's really think holistically about that growth. We have a transportation. This was established 2 years ago, and a big focus, going back to Barb's analogy of those clouds, probably the big stormy cloud that was producing the snow and rain was transportation. That's a high priority. It still is a high priority. but that really helped to put together a transportation system plan update and a bond that the community approved, which we're so grateful for. That was a big focus over the last 2 years, is developing that plan and then funding it. Public safety and health. We've really adopted that partnership model many years ago, both in police and fire, to say we can't continue to be this you call, we come type of agency. We've got to partner, and some of these issues around mental health and addiction and homelessness are not criminal issues. They require a different approach and a partnership approach. And so we, 2 years ago, began investing in those partnerships. And then with fire and EMS, we've developed a tiered system where it's not just sending fire engines to calls, but we have an apprenticeship program through that folks that are getting their EMT that are working part-time for us that can go respond to some of those lower level calls, just more verticality within how we provide those public safety first responder services. And then effective and efficient city operations is really kind of that, how do we make sure this is a well-run machine, that we're using data and technology to drive improvements. We've done a huge software upgrade. It's been a 5-year project in all corners of the city, everything from accounting and budgeting to just most recently a permitting software upgrade. And also our efforts to really employ an equity lens in all things that the city does. We began that work 2 years ago and are going to be really building on it over this next 2 years. So that's kind of the current framework. I actually want to go to the next slide, which is what the council has done. So this is just kind of a preview of their work. They met, as I mentioned, in January after the listening session, all those other key inputs, taking also into account kind of that baseline of what the current goals are. And so the kind of bottom line is you'll see more categories and actually more of a focus and opportunity for the Environment and Climate Committee because these areas represent their focus areas. So they've gone from 4 to 6. In addition to that, they've really put a preamble that's kind of an umbrella over everything that we do that centers around equity and justice and this idea of shared prosperity. So you'll see this all kind of flow together. But those core areas include environment and climate. So it's taking what wasn't under economic vitality and putting more of a focus on it. Safety, health, accountability, and justice. So kind of is similar to that previous goal, but putting accountability and justice in it as well, so that we make more systemic improvements to law enforcement and other criminal justice services. And then accessible and effective city government. So this is not just making sure it runs well, but making sure that it's more accessible to our community. Shared prosperity is the sort of elements of economic vitality of growth, but let's actually be thoughtful, especially as we're recovering from this pandemic, that we have to think more critically about how to raise everybody up. And we've been talking about the kind of K-shaped recovery that we'll see, where some folks will just bounce right back post-COVID and the economic sort of fallout. Some folks, it's going to get worse. And so let's make sure that our policies, programs, resources are being directed in that fashion to help those that are most vulnerable. And then transportation infrastructure. So we have the bond, we're in some ways resourced, but we still have other elements of our transportation system that need a lot of attention on the maintenance side. We have just the work ahead of us to prioritize all these $190 million worth of projects in transportation. And again, that linkage with our environment and climate plan of ultimately reducing our vehicle miles traveled. And, so a lot of these areas are, I wouldn't look at them in a very linear fashion. They're all somewhat integrated. To me, it's a web of focus areas and projects that are kind of working synergistically. And then of course, housing, and as Barb emphasized, that continues to be a major challenge for us. I think in this pandemic, and the attractiveness of Bend just drove up that demand even further. Demand and supply, when it's out of whack, it just drives up those upward pressures on pricing. And so, what can we do from a policy perspective, from a funding perspective, to continue to address that? And then of course, homelessness is a really acute issue, and that has not just the housing component, but also the services that need to be attached to that. So that's again one that kind of transcends not just one focus area. So There'll be an update to council on February 17th. That's their next council meeting and the work session. We've taken these broad themes and put strategies attached to them. There's like 3 to 5 strategies for each of the 6 areas, and then about 3 to 5 actions for each strategy. So in total, right now, the draft plan has these six areas with, I think it's 21 strategies and 79 actions. And a lot of those actions that you brought up as an Environment and Climate Committee are front and center in that environment and climate focus area that you see here on this slide. So it's evolving. Please stay tuned to it. It'll be posted with the council packet, that draft, later this week. The council will talk about it, probably further refine it. We're hoping that we're in a place where we vote on this broad framework of the goals, strategies, and actions at the end of March. Then that really informs that budget development. We put a budget together that responds to that plan and gets deliberated on in May. Council formally adopts it in June, and then we're off and running. So that's hopefully, I'm hopeful that's kind of what you're looking for in terms of just understanding kind of the system and how it works and a little bit of kind of where we're going. But again, happy to take any other questions that you might have.
Any questions? I noticed too that we had Mayor Russell, looks like joined us. So welcome, Mayor Russell. Thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. I just had a moment to drop into your meeting this morning. It's great to see you all. And yeah, good oversight, Eric and Barb. Appreciated your comments as well. I'm just wanted to sort of catch up and see where you were and what you were doing. So thanks. I'm going to, follow you and get a couple other things done too. But anyway, I look forward to seeing all this really valuable work that we're counting on you to do for our community. It's so relevant and time sensitive. So keep it going. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any. Oh, we have Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, just a question, Eric. If you're thinking about goals and sort of specific items, do you think about certain categories? I'm thinking items that have a budget implication, that have a cost tied to them versus others that are sort of the idea of a lens or policy tweaks. And if there are bins or categories or characteristics of recommendations that would be useful for us to think about as we're making policy, that there's maybe sort of functionally some budget that we're working with as a committee. And if you'd have any advice for us to think about different kinds of recommendations and goals and bins that are making that more useful and a better fit.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I mean, what I would like to do as we get, because these are council goals, I want to make sure that we're on the right track. And so they're my first checkpoint. But if they're assuming that they're kind of in agreement with some of the strategies and actions that we've developed, again, based a lot of input, I'm going to be asking Cassie to then use the Environment and Climate Committee to provide some additional detail. And I've got some ideas about how to allocate some resources. I want to work with Cassie to make sure that's in line of what we can accomplish over the next 2 years, and probably use the next couple of Environment and Climate Committee meetings to really solidify. So I want you all to be part of this work plan development, so that we all, to me, we're going to be much more successful if we kind of get our playbook. We do that work, that planning work up front, and then we can focus the next 2 years on execution and actually getting some things done. And we're all in alignment. So it's not council's going in this direction, this board and committees, we're moving together. And we don't sort of just hope that that happens after this planning period. We do quarterly. One other thing I should mention is we do quarterly check-ins with all of our boards and committees. So those clouds, and as I said, we have boards and committees that represent those clouds. They kind of keep us on track. So every quarter we report out our progress that we're making on the work plan, and make adjustments as needed. So sometimes our environment changes. We had COVID that kind of happened last year. And so we made some quick adjustments to our goals and work plan, took some things off, added some things back in. It's a dynamic process. So please know that, yeah, this is an intense period, but it doesn't stop there. We're always in this constant state of monitoring.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. But thanks again, Eric, for coming. I think this was really a useful conversation for us too, as we start moving into the next steps of trying to figure out kind of what can fit into that work plan for council goals. So it was really good to get kind of grounded in what you shared.
Well, and again, thanks for having me. I'm happy to come back at any point in time, and look forward to continue to the conversation and moving in partnership together. So I've got to run. I've got another presentation that I've got to give at noon. So I'm going to drop off and wish you a good day. It's starting to snow.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay,
Eric.
thanks.
Thank you, Eric.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop my screen share because I don't have any more slides for the day. The next agenda item was to just I just had a couple of quick updates. The first is that a couple of weeks ago, I shared a folder with a lot of information called ECC Data and Resources. And that's got basically, I compiled as many of the resources that I could find that I've been using, that we kind of developed as part of the CCAP or were reviewed as part of the CCAP. So I just want to confirm that you all saw that and were able to open it. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. So that, I think that can be the placeholder for what we called like kind of our information repository as a way to exchange resources. So if you guys have things that you want to, other things you want me to add in there or other information, we now have that as a tool. That's kind of that's just established for us. So I'm glad that worked. And then the other thing that I wanted to just handle in the updates today was that at the last meeting, we had raised a discussion about how to handle emails that come to the committee members and replying to those emails. And I said we would I kind of tabled it to talk about later in the meeting. And it occurred to me that we never really came back to it. So I know that you're all starting to get more emails here and there. And so I wanted to just open the discussion back up for you all to decide how you want to handle replying to those emails. I'll say the one thing that I've seen so far that may work well is that people, any committee member who's interested, reply to the person and then CC, ideally the chair once we have the chair picked, but people have been CCing me as well. And that way you have some people that are just monitoring to make sure that people are getting replied to and that sort of thing. But I want to let you all decide how you want to handle that. So I'll just open it up to anyone who has ideas on how to handle replying to emails that come into you all. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think generally that process that I think was brought up last meeting of somebody replying and then the chair getting CC'd, so then the chair can make sure that so then someone can make sure that there is a response is great. The only challenge I think is making sure that we don't have too many people responding to the email and don't know the best way of doing that without reply all. So yeah, that's my only question for the group.
I'll talk, I guess. I had my hand raised for a second, but I also agree. I wanted to, one of the reasons we talked about making sure a chair or co-chairs on the responses is to also just keep track of things that are being talked about in case we need to have a parking lot of items for agenda topics down the road. And so just wanting to be aware that we don't overlook anything as things are, discussed between committee members at some point.
I can jump in just on the point that Cassie raised about, that Neil might have raised about too many people replying all. It's possible we could just create a little spreadsheet in the shared document file that the chair updates when they've seen that people respond to an email and just keeps count. If we reach, X number of people who have responded, which is 1 or 3 or something, before responding, you can just check there and see if somebody's replied yet.
I had a quick question, Cassie. All the emails that are getting sent to us, are they part of like a public record as well? So is that something that's should be stored somewhere? You're still muted.
Sorry. It doesn't need to be like stored and filed away anywhere. When it's in your email, it's part of the public record. So there's no process that needs to happen to make sure it's filed away anywhere.
And another quick thought, potentially. Oh, sorry, Bill, I saw your hand raised. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go for it. No, go for it.
I'll just say it quick. There is an option too, not to get too complicated, but if there's anyone on the committee that wants to maybe kind of be that's not the chair or the co-chair, but somebody that wants to kind of represent and respond to those emails and be kind of that outreach, I don't know what you'd call them, like a representative internally, and they kind of be the point person for that outreach. It's just a thought, just a suggestion, because it kind of then doesn't put added pressure on the chair's role, because they already have a lot on their plate. And obviously it doesn't mean you can't reply as another committee member, but just kind of trying to diversify roles and responsibilities potentially. Just throwing it out there as an option.
Yeah, that's an interesting role. It might not be that, we might get that many inputs, but then as things move on, we might. I mean, I agree, both Neil's comment and Tessa's possible solution makes some sense, where I think we got to track it, because you could be getting answers we could be replying and all saying something different, and then the person would be very confused. I mean, I think we do have to reply to people. I know that people want to be heard, and it's important that they are heard. But I think we need to be consistent. And like I said, I think I said in the previous one, we're sort of representing ourselves, not the committee. So I like the idea that if you reply, you make a note somewhere, be it a spreadsheet, then at least people can know. And I think it also does make sense that the chair could get really burdened if they're always trying to make sure that everyone knows that someone has replied. So there's a lot of good ideas there. I'm not sure which one is the best one, but at least some central repository, and a spreadsheet could work, or an individual that you CC every time that is going to keep track of it. But you got to get the communication back out to everybody. So that's the spreadsheet. So I don't know, that it didn't help very much, but I know we do have to do something about keeping track of how many people are replying.
Yeah, Ian, do you have some input?
Yeah, hey everybody, Ian Lighthizer, City Attorney's Office. Maybe more questions than input. This might be something that maybe Cassie and I get together and talk about after this meeting, because frankly, I'd probably like a little more context on what kind of messages you're getting, who's getting them. I mean, my understanding is that everybody, or most everybody, is using individual email addresses for participation in this committee. I don't know if there's an ECC all general email that people, community members, can send input to. But I mean, there are three kind of big things to think about, and they're not surprising. There are public records issues, which you're talking about. There are sort of inadvertent public meetings landmines that you can walk into. And the other one that's a little more subtle is when you're responding to somebody or engaging with anybody who's interested in these topics, making sure that you're keeping in mind the distinction between acting or communicating as an individual member of a committee on the one hand, and the other, representing either intentionally or not the position of the ECC to the extent ECC has or maybe has not taken a position on something. So these are kind of nuanced, but they're kind of important distinctions. So to the extent that the committee needs to come up with a protocol on sort of whether and how to respond to inputs you get, I think that's totally valid. I wouldn't mind having a little time with Cassie to talk about kind of what you're seeing, what you anticipate getting, and maybe some best practices for all of you to handle those. Because you're not alone. Other, Planning Commission, for example, has a Planning Commission all email. And so when people have an input on a development issue, they will email that and all the planning commissioners get that. So it's not a unique phenomenon, but Cassie, maybe you and I can chat at some point if you don't iron things out today. So I think it's a good discussion to have, but I guess I would recommend that you have the discussion and let Cassie and I have a little bit of time maybe before the next meeting to help come up with a solid plan for how to handle this. I mean, bottom line, I don't think it has to be a big deal. If somebody asks one of you in your capacity as a member of this committee what you think on something, you can engage with them, or what you think about something. You can engage with them and you can tell them what you think, as so long as you are cognizant of making it clear that you may be expressing a personal opinion or your personal views on something rather than something that the committee as a whole has decided, if it hasn't decided that yet. So a lot to discuss. Sorry to interject and interrupt the discussion, but I did want to do so just to make sure that maybe Cassie and I have a time to chat about it before any final plans are settled on.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ian. I'll schedule a follow-up. And because I think you're right, we could probably, I haven't asked other committees that also face this, what their protocols are. So I'll definitely do that before the next meeting as well. Mark?
I just wanted to say that I think the substance is something we want to make sure we don't lose in this, that if people are coming to us, there's something they want us to know about. And as much as sort of getting back to them, I think having a role which might be distinct, that's investigating, reviewing, even reporting back to the group on the kind of information they provide to us. So I almost feel like there's sort of a research component to probably at least most of them. I think most of the comments we've had so far, people want to let us know about a problem or a solution idea, and make sure that we also have a process that's reviewing the recommendations or the data sources they're providing. So that might be distinct. And again, it could probably fit into that, but as long as we're thinking about having that substance piece to this as well.
Javi?
So I think Ian already kind of mentioned some of these things, but those are some of the questions or things I was thinking about too, is how do other committees do this? I know for city council, there's that one city council email that goes to all the city councilors. And if it makes sense to have something similar for our committee where it's like ECC all, like Ian mentioned, where it does go to everyone, and then we can still have someone appointed to reply to them, letting them know that it's been sent to all the councilors. So whatever makes sense in terms of that, as long as we have a process, I think that makes sense also for people who are submitting their comments to know that it's been heard. Thanks.
Ian, is your hand up again?
It's still up. I'm going to lower it and just have to click through like 8 buttons to get there.
Okay.
As one additional follow-up, it's one thing to hear these or to read these via email. It's another to discuss them in this context. And some of these, I think we've only received a couple, but there may be benefit to having a set period of time within our committee meetings to discuss, or at least to represent what we've received via email as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Okay, so this, I think it was really good to hear your different thoughts and ideas. And I think as a next step for this, Ian and I will get together and talk about this, and maybe I'll come back next meeting and propose what a good kind of mechanism might be based off of your suggestions and what him and I talk about. Okay, cool. Well, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the elections of our chair and vice chair. So a very exciting time. We do need to elect a chair and a vice chair. As you can see, we just have a lot of work that we need to start doing with respect to kind of helping further define the council goals and start developing recommendations throughout the rest of the year. So it's really vital that we get a chair and a vice chair elected to kind of help lead the committee through that. So just a quick reminder of the expectations of the chair role. They lead the meetings and the group. So even a lot of the stuff that I've been kind of leading for the committee meetings, like down to just welcoming everyone, doing the public comment, moving through the agenda, that the chair will actually take over and run the actual meetings. And I think a really important part for this first chair is that for this committee, you do all have a lot to figure out as far as what are your processes for moving through your work, and how you want to carry out the work. And so we've had a lot of discussion. We've started to have some of that discussion, but I think the chair and the vice chair being in that leadership role is just going to be an important role, and to kind of help get the group going and take some of those recommendations and start really shaping what the process of how the committee wants to work together. So the chair will have some extra work, both the chair and the vice chair. They can also delegate work. So it's not that the chair needs to do everything, but that the chair would need to be responsible and to feel comfortable taking a lead on delegating work as well. And I think very importantly, the chair and the vice chair should both feel pretty comfortable being the spokesperson for the group for council meetings or other occasional requests like media or other presentations to other groups that are requested. As far as the time commitment, it's a little tough to say because since it's the first year, we just don't know exactly how it's going to look. As you've seen, staff are here to help with a lot. So I'll still be here to help make drafts of things. Staff will still send out the agendas and do all the kind of prep for the meeting. And that way, since we have to do those, we have to public notice those. But so far, we've had staff really kind of running and leading the meetings, and we do need to switch that. It's been very staff directed, but we kind of want to hand the reins over to you all and allow the committee to kind of self-direct, how you want to run your meetings and do your work. And so I do think with that will come probably a higher level of work than we've seen so far, probably potentially for all the committee members, but particularly for the chair and vice chair. And then kind of minimum additional time commitment is that I do like to typically have a pre and a post meeting check-in with the officers so we can debrief after each meeting, make sure I'm spending the next month working on whatever you all need for me to prepare for you, and then meeting typically like a week before the next meeting so that I can make sure the chair and the vice chair have everything that they need to run the meeting effectively. So do you have any questions on just the role itself before we talk about the elections? Okay, great. I'm not seeing any questions. So I guess, how do you all want to go about electing your chair and vice chair today? Do you want to just open the floor and see who would like to nominate themselves, or does anyone have opinions on other types of discussions you want to have before you make that decision?
I think given that this is new and self-nomination may be the best next step.
I'd agree with that. It seems like we should just hear who is interested in it. That'll give us the best idea of who's thought about it and who wants to lead us in that way.
I'll also just make a general comment that I think compared to other chair and vice chair roles, that this is a slightly different role because we're new. And so I imagine the chair and vice chair will end up working a lot together, just because I think there will be an additional workload at the beginning of working through this committee getting off the ground. So maybe a little bit less of the formal distinction as we might have later down the road.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, well then maybe we'll just open the floor for self-nominations. Is anyone interested in being, let's start with the chair.
I can go first. I'm pretty excited about the opportunity to either jump into the chair or the vice chair role, and don't know the best way to discuss that. I have the capacity and am excited to work together to make to really help shape this committee and the work that we do. And with the limited time that we have. But I also don't have, am comfortable with a lot of the tasks that were listed, including being a representative and speaking to council, but don't have the same experience as some others on the committee in terms of the just committee experience and kind of the structures around that, which I think is an important role in here as well. So I don't know how we do nominations and voting, but just as a general conversation piece, I would be happy in either the chair or vice chair role if others have other thoughts or interests.
Yeah, maybe I'll add that I feel like I would be pretty good at some of the organizational pieces that I've been on a lot of boards and in committees and the like, and I feel comfortable communicating, but I recognize that workload piece is an important one, and having folks that are able to really put a lot of time and effort in, as you said, Neil, here up front is important. And maybe there is even a way that we'd want to think about a broader division of some of these labors and responsibilities, kind of like Tess, what you were describing, some of the outreach process. But I'm also happy to be useful in some of those roles if it's helpful. But if there are people who feel like they've got a lot of time and are really anxious to do it, I'm happy to be supportive in a different way as well.
Cassie?
Yeah.
On that note, I just had a question. Is it something that we're able to also have like informal roles, like secretary or other roles that we can have that we create for further division of labor?
Yeah, I think that's fine. If you all would like to define some other tasks, I think that would be totally fine. So that would be up to you all. I would recommend first picking the chair and vice chair so we can they can help maybe give some structure to those discussions and decisions. Bill? We can't really, you're breaking up a lot. We can just barely hear you.
Pull your string tighter, Bill.
Bill, if you can hear us, we still cannot hear you. So I'm sorry about that. Maybe try reconnecting, but we can, I think, move on if anyone else has anything they'd like to say. And Bill, if you can hear us, maybe if you could mute your microphone. Okay, I'm sure he'll be back.
Can Bill maybe use the Q&A as an alternative?
Like in the chat?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure. Mary, are we allowed to use the chat?
Hey, hi, everybody. I'm Mary Winters. I'm the city attorney. I just took over for Ian because he has another meeting and I just got out of one. So here I am. We try not to use the chat just because of the public records issue, and it's hard to for us to store those that chat function. So if he wants to talk to you substantively, this is maybe a Kayla and Robin question, but I don't think we can store those chats as your record for the meeting. It's a good idea, Mayor, for him to communicate with you but I'm not sure that we can keep those. I think is the issue. That's why we've discouraged the use of the chat. But I think for him to sign out and try to sign in again, has he been having trouble?
He was actually a little bit because he's kind of in a remote spot right now, but he was able to connect and talk. So I assume it'll either work again or it just won't work at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you and welcome.
And he can still call in from the phone, right? If that's something that works for him.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
It occurs to me, I have complete confidence in Neil and Mark and would be super supportive of their abilities. It occurs to me, since we're having the conversation, we have a moment in time here for the next 2 years. Would there be in the pursuit of equity and inclusion, would it be nice, or would there be a female member who'd be interested? I'm just throwing that out there. I have no problems with Neil or Mark either way.
I was going to say the same thing. That would really be a nice gesture, I think, for the committee.
And I've heard some fantastic ideas, and I don't want to throw anyone else under the bus on who I'd be interested in, because I don't want anyone volunteering me. But I'm just throwing that out there for conversation because it's important right now.
Yeah, this is Serena. I was thinking the same thing, and I've actually been interested in these roles as well, and I agree with everyone saying, Neil and Mark are perfect for this. I enjoy being in that position when I have the time. I guess my biggest hesitancy for me is the time commitment, just because I have a lot on my plate right now. I would make it a priority for sure if it was something that people wanted, if I was selected. But I just want to make sure that the time commitment is, that's my biggest hesitancy in creating and putting myself fully out there. That's all I have. But I do enjoy having the conversations and being part of that discussion and helping to formulate that organizational structure.
I'm also wondering, as we're making a big decision right now, if Bill's interested in throwing his name in the hat and can't communicate right now.
Bill, are you, it looks like you've reconnected. Why don't you go ahead and try to talk again?
Yeah, I'm back. I think I don't want to at this time. I would be willing to be involved in some kind of a operating committee or something that helped advise, but I think I don't want to do this at this point in time.
Thank you. Was there something you were sharing before you got disconnected?
I was just going to say, yeah, I was going to say in my other group that we do have to Kavi's point, we have a small group that helps the chair and the staff of the council to come up with agendas and other business items. So to take some of the burden off of them. So like Kavi was talking about secretary, and I don't know that we need to be official, but like 2 or 3 people actually where everybody gets together and they can discuss. That was handy. That's all I was going to say, and then I completely blew up. Where are we at?
So what you missed, Bill, was that just a question was raised. There was expression that Neil and Mark would put their names forward. Everyone would have a lot of confidence in them, but raising the question if we'd like to have a woman also be one of the officer roles. So that's what we're discussing now. And then Serena also said Serena expressed interest in being one of those roles, but expressed some reservation about the time commitment.
And I'm in the same position as Serena. My only concern is my ability to, from a time commitment perspective, I'm interested in both and excited to be part of this in whatever capacity.
Yeah, I think having one of the roles filled by a woman and one filled by a man makes a lot of sense for what we're trying to do here. And then maybe the compromise is then having a couple additional roles so that we can still accomplish that, but then, spread out some of the workload too. I think that can be done.
Yeah, in general, I love that that proposal, and I think once the creating that small group that can still meet and work through some of these bigger kind of direction goals, it shouldn't. We have a lot of breadth on this committee, and some of that direction shouldn't just be concentrated with the chair and vice chair, but there's a lot that needs to be worked out that can't just happen in the meeting. So I love that structure of having having the official roles and then having kind of a subcommittee that can still meet and do a little bit of that delegation, getting this committee off the ground.
Yeah, I'll say we have executive committees on 2 boards that I'm on, and I've served on an executive committee, so we could describe it that way.
I'm guessing the only thing to be careful of is the size of that committee has to be smaller.
Exactly. And my only caution is if it's a committee, like if you call it a subcommittee, then under Oregon's open meetings law, it becomes its own governing body, subject to the open meetings law. And it just creates more work that those meetings have to be noticed and have minutes and all of that. So if it's just an advisory group, then it's not an issue. If it's the size, but if it is a governing body itself, sorry, my phone's ringing, I'm in the office. If it's its own governing body, then it's more complicated just procedurally. So that's just something to think about. If it's just officers and they're not making recommendations, then it's okay.
So just a quick follow-up question on that, not to get too much into that, but if we had like a lead person for some of the different focus areas and they worked one-on-one with the chair and vice chair and it's the 3 of them, is that okay?
That's fine. I would say just don't call it a subcommittee. Like you get so used to that and all the other work that you do, and it all seems so normal. And then you get in government and you hear us lawyers babble about things like governing bodies and subcommittees and don't, because then it becomes something, and you get it. It's if it's a body that makes recommendations, the public just has a right to be there. But you also want to be efficient in your work. And sometimes you just need people to help the chair and the vice chair do agendas. And you don't want to get all complicated with notice meetings and having, once you're in person, you have to have in a room that's ADA accessible, and it just becomes unwieldy in doing your work. So you're right, if they're just helping, then it's not a governing body and it's fine.
So my question is for those who put themselves forward but said they had some concerns around the time, just the amount of time. For any of you, are you feeling like because of the time constraints, you're primarily interested in a vice chair role over a chair role? And acknowledging what Neil said, that it'll probably be a lot of working together in the beginning, but if one is going to have more work than the other, it will probably be the chair. So are you all interested, or all of you who indicated interested in either? I'm trying to figure out, like, if someone wants to nominate a chair and a vice chair, that we can move forward for a vote. Are there some people that want to put themselves out there for only one or the other? So I heard a little bit of concern about time from Mark, Kelly, and Serena. So I guess for you 3, are you interested? Is there one or the other that you're interested or not in? And Serena, it looked like your hand was raised. Did she disappear?
Muted.
I think you're muted.
Oh, there. Oh, Serena, you're muted. You're on mute.
Yes, I am talking to myself. I would definitely be interested more right now in the vice chair role with and like I said, I'd be fully committed and make sure that it's a priority. I just want to make sure that this group has, enough bandwidth all the way around to make sure that we get the right people in the right positions.
And I would say there are a couple areas of interest that I have from more of a lead perspective that I think in this first year, I would be better suited for.
Oh, like, so a chair, you're interested in the chair?
Yeah, whatever we're calling it. We can't call it committees, leads, chair, whatever it may be.
But the chair, like, sorry, just so I'm like, I don't know why this is confusing to me. Are you saying of those 2, you're more interested in the chair role, or of the chair and vice chair, or are you saying you're more interested in being one of those leads that being like helps with? Oh, okay, so not the chair and vice chair.
Yeah, I think if we're looking for a woman to fill one of these roles, then I'm happy to be part of that. But I think at this point in time, I'm probably better suited for one of the leads, not chairs.
Okay, and then Mark, what about you? Because you also mentioned a time constraint.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit indifferent, but I recognize and appreciate that Neil might be more confident in his ability to put a lot of time into it. I feel like I've got decent experience and I feel comfortable in front of groups, but my feelings will not be hurt in any way. And I'm happy to play a support role as well if that's, I think it probably is in reality, sort of thinking about the different perspectives that we have in reality and time availability and experience and how we balance it out. But, Neil, if you feel really good about it and strong about it, I'm happy to play a support role as well. So whatever works best for the group. And so I don't know if I answered your question directly, Cassie. I think I'm saying I'm willing to play any of the roles, including outside of the chair and vice chair.
Okay, and then Neil, just to be clear, I know you said you would do either, but you said that you think you have enough capacity to take on a larger amount of time if the chair were to have a larger amount of time.
Yeah, it sounds like if that's the differentiator.
It doesn't have to be. I guess I was just trying to. Yeah.
But yeah, I see Peter smiling. I think that this is a situation I've been in a lot of groups where there's people that are willing to help, but nobody wants to step on each other's toes. Just kind of the public process of deciding self-governance is a really funny one. So I'm glad we're not in the situation where it was just radio silence and nobody was interested at all. But I am, my original statement was if there was somebody that was really interested in the chair role, I'd be happy to, fill whatever I can, but I do have the time availability to be able to take that larger piece. And I'm happy to do that happy to do that.
Bill?
Okay, well, now that I've heard all of this, I think I will make the nomination for Neil as chair and Serena as vice chair. And I think those are good choices.
Any second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we'll have a vote and then we can have a discussion after the vote. So all in favor of Bill's nomination of Neil as the chair and Serena as the vice chair, please raise your hand. And let's raise the Zoom hands. I know I was kind of ambivalent about that before, or ambiguous.
Can I just ask a quick question before voting?
Sure.
Did we open up the floor just to see if anyone else was interested in being in the vice chair role or running just to see if anyone else was interested before I vote?
Well, yeah, so maybe, I guess since we had the nomination, I thought a motion was put forward. We should move through the nomination. Do you guys want to pull back the nomination for now and open the discussion again and hear from everybody or hear from more people that would like to share?
If that's what you want, I can retract the nomination, but it seemed like we had heard from everyone that was interested or not interested. So I can do that if.
That's okay. Then I just want to make sure we had heard from everyone for the vice chair in case someone else was still interested.
Well, I did see some nods, Bill. So when we suggested opening the discussion back up again, so maybe it's a good idea if we want to retract that for now and then open the discussion one more time.
Okay, so I retract my nomination of Neil and for chair and Serena as vice chair.
Okay, thank you. I've never done a motion retraction before. Is there another step we have to take?
Probably better second it.
Mary?
I mean, procedurally, there isn't really a retraction.
I know, it's
yeah, I know it's rules, but if it's been moved and seconded, but that's okay. This is a fairly casual. I think it's more important that you guys feel comfortable with the process you're using than following Robert's rules strictly right now. So.
Yeah, I was a little squeamish. I do Robert's rules for other group, and that's
Yeah.
once you've got it on the floor, it's not.
Exactly.
I don't own it. I can't really retract it because I don't own the motion anymore. It belongs to the floor. So somebody else actually has to make a motion or something.
We don't have a chair right now to rule on anything. So
I'm out of order, but I'm.
yeah. So maybe let there be any discussion and then make the motion again if you want. But I just want to clarify, I saw you might have said this and I didn't hear it. Are you proposing a chair for the first year, not for 2 years, but for 1 year?
1 year.
Correct? 1 year, okay.
Yes, I should have asked you, Mary, what the protocol was at the beginning.
Yeah, that's okay.
Peter?
Yeah, just thought it would be good to have discussion before we did the vote. I just wanted to be respectful of Mark throwing his name in the hat and then all of a sudden getting bumped out of this whole thing. Like, is he cool with that? I want us all to feel good moving forward. I like these two folks, but it felt weird to vote on it before we heard full discussion.
No, that's fine. Yeah, my feelings aren't hurt. Don't worry about that. I'm glad that Neil feels like he's got a lot of time available. I think that will, as he says, be an important piece of his first year.
And so maybe for Bill or Mary or Cassie, is that the order? Like we would have voted and sealed that deal before there was discussion?
Well, I don't know, Mary, if you have thoughts, but in our first meeting, we did kind of talk about how we want to do the motion. And what we had discussed was that you have a motion, a second, a vote, and then discussion. Am I correct, Mary?
No.
No. Well, you have a motion and a second, and then discussion, and then the vote.
Okay.
Sometimes, and Cassie's acting as a chair. Sometimes you put the issue on the table, and before you have the motion, you might have people talk about, and it's really what you did. You could have nominations, then discussion, so that you could have different people, weigh each other before there was a motion. Because sometimes it's tricky because if somebody beats everybody else to the motion, then other people don't have a chance. If the motion passes and somebody else wanted it, then they don't. So that's why you would have nominations. And I think Cassie tried to say who wants to nominate themselves. Then you would have nominations and a discussion of and you kind of did have some nominations. And then somebody raised the issue of equity and diversity. So I think you guys essentially did the process that would normally happen without being super formal about it.
We didn't open the discussion before the vote, which I apologize about.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is that the way it works in a vote? I mean, sorry, this is Bill. I know that's how it works with motions when you're in a normal meeting, but is voting different than that? Is it really a motion as much as it is a nomination? I'm not sure if there's a difference between voting for elections versus standard motions. I'm not familiar with the voting part because we don't vote like that about elections.
Yeah, I mean, our rules say that at the first meeting that committees shall select a chair and vice chair. So there's no provision for any other officers, but they do say that you will select a chair and vice chair. So my experience has been it's usually by motion that they select a chair, and different committees do it differently. Our committees aren't extremely formal usually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't want to get us off in the weeds, but I think we're good. But so it looks, I think it's good that you brought it up, that we needed to discuss it. So I guess I could make this motion again, and we could go through this process again, maybe the correct way, which would be we get a motion and a second, and then we can have a discussion and then our vote. So will that help move this along here? I mean, I did listen before I made this suggestion to what everyone said and tried to match what we were talking about. So I wasn't just trying to jump in here and grab the first, I got the first chance to make a motion. That wasn't what I was trying to do, because I tried to listen. So if everyone's okay, I will make this motion again. So I'm gonna make the motion that we nominate Neil for chair and Serena for vice chair.
This is Rory, I'll second it.
Okay, now we'll open it for discussion.
I love that idea.
So Covey, the question I think that you brought up earlier that would have fit in this discussion slot was just that we initially opened the floor for self-nominations for chair and not fully for vice chair. Is that right?
Yeah,
so
I wasn't
just
sure what
leaving the floor open if other folks are interested in the vice chair role?
Yeah, I just don't know how voting usually works in committee structures like this, but I
Yeah.
don't know if it makes sense to do one at a time. So that way, if there were more people interested in chair, they had the chance to maybe run for vice chair if there was an actual election kind of structure.
And this is Serena. I just wanted to add, as you know, as I said before, I'm happy also if somebody else feels really strongly about wanting that position, I'm happy to step aside. I threw my hat in the ring because I thought about it, and I think it'd be a good position for me at this point in time. But at the same point, wouldn't hurt my feelings if somebody else was feeling strongly about taking it. Sorry, Bill.
Any other discussion? Are we comfortable moving to the vote? Okay, all in
Yes.
favor, please raise your Zoom hand. And any opposed? Yeah, and take your Zoom hand down. Okay, so the motion carries, and we have chosen elected Neil as the chair for the ECC and Serena as the vice chair for the ECC for, it will be until January 2022, so slightly under 1 year. Great, how exciting. Okay, well, we have, we can move on in the agenda. We have 20 minutes, so I suspect we will not make it through the whole agenda that we had planned for today. But what I had wanted to cover for the rest of the day was I had the CCAP action matrix that I provided. And I just wanted to go through that really quickly and answer any questions. And then the rest of the meeting was really a discussion, kind of like we had last meeting, which is really what are the next steps, that how do we want to move forward as a committee as a whole, and also moving forward with the CCAP. And I think we heard from Eric today that we're hoping to have the committee kind of focus on some of the priorities for the CCAP over the next couple of months so that we can kind of include those in the council goals package. So I think we'll get through that CCAP action matrix today. We probably won't get to the next discussion, but what I'm thinking is, now that we have a chair and a vice chair, I might propose that if people have, we've started to hear a lot of ideas, so I think there's a lot, I can meet with the chairs, and I think we have a lot to go off of based on a lot of the discussion we had even just in this last discussion. But also, if you have other ideas that you had in mind for, like, hey, I really think it's important that the committee does this or that next before we get into our work, or to help us do our work, I think you can email Neil and Serena both with those ideas, and or maybe set up one-on-one meetings with them, and you can start having some of those discussions, especially if they're one-on-one or very small groups separately too. So I think we can move forward with that even if we don't have time to discuss in full today. So let's see, for the CCAP action matrix, I'm actually going to share my screen again and just pull up the matrix itself. I'm hoping it's not too teeny for everyone to see. Can you guys see that? Are you looking at it?
And just as
So-
a note, if folks are struggling to see it, I just found the view options in Zoom recently at the top of your screen, and you can zoom in and move it around if you're struggling to see the spreadsheet.
Oh, that's good to know. Thanks.
Thank you for all of us older folks, Neil.
Okay, so the way that this matrix works is, I've got the strategies in column A, the actions in column B. And then the other information I included is the first column is like action initiation. And this just describes whether the action that is something that needs to be initiated by the ECC in order for it to occur. So if the ECC does not choose to initiate this action, I mean, potentially it could occur if there's other community interest in it, but it's not something that we would necessarily be moving forward with until the ECC says, hey, this is something that we really want to push forward now. And so this is the majority of them. And these are the ones that I think will take the most time because they're the ones that need the highest degree of direction and decisions by the committee, because they're kind of ones that are a little bit more open-ended that need to be shaped a little bit. And then some of the other ones that are listed in there are actions that occur through external processes. So it may be something like a statewide initiative, or it may be something that's in the works through another agency, or something even that a department at the city is moving forward. So they'll be moving through an external process, but they're ones that we definitely want the ECC input on at a certain point. So some examples are that there is a statewide CPACE initiative, like there's a movement out there to launch a statewide CPACE program. Oh, and there's the community green tariff discussion that's going on at the state level. And so those are ones that we definitely want to plan on the committee having discussions at the right time, kind of at those key decision points. And it will involve the committee providing feedback or direction on a particular topic. Those are the ones that if we were not we really want committee input, because if we didn't have committee input, we might not actually take as active as a role in those other statewide processes, because we want to make sure that it's kind of being led by what we're hearing from the community. So those are ideas that will kind of come to you, I guess, at the right time. And I can share those, or committee members can share those when we know there are decision points to be made, which actually might be, some of those could be coming up fairly soon. And then the last one in the kind of action initiation bucket are actions that occur through an external process. And they don't necessarily need committee input because they're likely to occur regardless. But because they're important parts of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I expect that this committee would want to track their progress. And also, it doesn't mean that the committee cannot provide input into that external process or help give direction. But it means that if you give input or not, the things will probably occur. So those are actions that we'll want to be monitoring. And if you all choose to, we might have to look for opportunities to give input into that. So that's kind of the difference between those two. The city initiative or partnership, the different columns in there are ones that are entirely city-led, some that we recommend a partnership for, and some that require a partnership. So the ones that require a partnership are ones where the action must be led by another entity because it's just within the functional area of the other entity. So the transit strategies fall into that category. Some of the solid waste strategies fall into that category. And then the ones that are recommended partnerships are ones that we envision the city creating some kind of partnership with another organization, like a nonprofit or someone else. Those actions are ones that theoretically the city could do. It's not necessarily entirely outside of what we have the authority to do, but given our strengths and weaknesses, there are just better entities that are, there are other entities that are better suited to actually being the one to provide that service. But the city can find a way to kind of facilitate a partnership to make those things happen. So some of the ones that fall into that are like a number of the outreach and education programs, or like some of the workforce development programs, where there are other entities out there that it falls more in line with kind of some of the things that they provide to the community. And so So I think those, whether it's like city-led or a partnership, and also the different action initiation, those are both big ones that I think make a big difference with respect to something we can do quickly versus something that will take longer to do. So when prioritizing, it might just be smart to keep that in mind. And then the next column was lever of action. It explains kind of what the mechanism of the action is. So we've kind of categorized them in the past as voluntary program, incentives, public-private investment, or regulation. So that one's kind of self-explanatory. Some of them you'll notice could fall into a couple of different of the categories, like depending on how you actually define them. So those don't necessarily need to be a hard and fast how they must be carried out, but it was the way that they were proposed as in the CCAP. But for example, you could have a voluntary program might be like a technical assistance program or an outreach program for energy efficiency, but you could also achieve the action you could go a little stronger by creating an incentive to do something like that. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. And then the last column was just the level of effort or time. That was just a broad brush estimate based on kind of how the other pieces of it add up, and what I anticipate the pathway would be, and what kind of synergies or barriers there are with the action. So I also included a memo that kind of gave probably a better description of those columns. So I guess to start, does anyone have just clarification questions about what they've seen in the action matrix? Javi?
So my one question was looking at the action matrix and looking at the CCAP itself. The one thing I feel that I find kind of missing is it doesn't include information on the emissions reduction or the co-benefits in the matrix itself. And I feel like that would be really valuable in terms of prioritizing as well, in terms of seeing the impact of each of the strategies. So I think we already have that information, it's just not in the matrix itself. Would it be possible to add that in there?
Sure, I can add it in. Yeah, what I was trying to include here was information that we just hadn't provided in other ways, but it would be easy for me to just go in and add some columns. So do you want the columns you suggested was the greenhouse gas reduction, and what was the other one, the cost?
The co-benefits, I know that's harder to kind of put in that column itself.
Yeah, that one would be hard just because it's not, it's like a graphic kind of with all these like 6 different little icons. So, but yeah, I mean, you'll want to be referring to the CCAP as a whole. I mean, I think in general, you should be, this is to give you more information, but the CCAP has a lot more information. So you still want to be using that document as your primary reference document in general.
Got it. And it doesn't have to be the same level of information. Even something like low, medium, high would be helpful to also just like kind of have it gauge it that way.
Sure. Peter?
Yeah, in the spirit of not assuming anything at this point in time, I realize this was developed and it's very helpful by the previous working group. Are we locked in now to these definitions? And like, I'm looking specifically at the lever of action. Do we have the power, authority, opportunity to change the category of the lever of action?
Yeah, that's what I guess I was trying to say, is that this was like how they were. So it wasn't actually included in this list wasn't included in the CCAP. So like that specific categorization was not adopted formally. This was just how I was just kind of using my brain from how we were thinking about the action when it was created to just show that different grouping of it. But I believe it's flexible, and it would, yeah, you can have a discussion about how they're applied, because some of them are kind of transferable.
Yeah, because I don't want to go to any rabbit holes here, but I have concerns on our desire to make change in a timely fashion on what's voluntary versus what's regulatory versus what's incentivized.
Bill?
Yeah, I hate to add another column too. Something I was thinking about in terms of if we're trying to think about what ones we're going to do first, it would be good to have in this place where it's at right now. I mean, in other words, for example, it seems like the 100% renewable electricity supply isn't that being worked on right now? So that, in other words, if something's brand new, we haven't started it, that's one way of criteria to apply. Whereas if something's moving already and we need to act on it, then that would increase the prioritization for that action. So I guess I just wondered if there's a way to say, is it, in process? Is it, is it not in process? Is that useful? Would that be useful?
One way to think about it is that the actions that are occurring through an external process, I only indicated that they were occurring through an external process if there was an external process underway. There was nothing in there that was like, this is a future external process. So anything that is action requires ECC initiation and direction would be something that is not started. Anything that's either of the other categories is something that has started to a certain extent. And the reason I would be hesitant to say, where are we now in this document, is it would become out of date within weeks because of, a lot of the external processes in particular.
Okay, we can just be aware of that as we're discussing it then, right? I guess that's just don't want to lose that, because that can change when you think things need to be acted on and where decisions need to be made. So I've got another piece. I was thinking about this all along here. It just as a group, we haven't really sat down and thought about how we're going to prioritize these things. What are the criteria by which we prioritize? Is it big, as Kavi mentioned, is it have a big greenhouse gas reduction option? We'd want to look at that one. Or can it get done quickly? Or is it low cost and can get done quickly? There's a lot of different criteria in here that seems like we should maybe we could agree on if we thought that was important before we started really going through the individual actions. Is that making any sense? In other words, it's sort of a meta thing. What's our prioritization? What are our prioritization criteria for evaluating these things? Silence.
Well, I did raise my hand. I was going to agree with that. And it probably would be a good way to take the group's temperature to get a sense of what people think are their priorities for those criteria. Sort of what they think are, maybe we can go around the group and say one or two things that we think are some of the most important to have in mind. And some of those might lead to information and homework for staff or committee members as well.
I didn't raise my hand. I was just going to say, I think that is the big question that we as a group are going to need to figure out, is how we're prioritizing these things. And both, I think one of the steps, and this is something where some open conversation with the group when we have a little bit more time, would be figuring out what we need to know to be able to prioritize these things. So that is something that I've definitely thought about and I think would be helpful to get people's feedback on, and also just make sure that we have the different experts of the group getting eyes on different actions that they have experience with. So then we can make sure that we're all caught up to understand exactly what these, all of these different pieces have. So then we can also interpret as our group and not as the previous group, kind of, how to sub-prioritize everything. And I cut somebody off. I don't know who it was.
Tess, it looked like you had your hand up. Did you have something to add?
I did. I think Neil mostly covered it, but I just wanted to address that. I think this action matrix is kind of pretty key background information that would feed into the prioritization discussion. Not that we're bypassing it necessarily by discussing these items that Cassie put together for us.
Percy?
Is this something we can comment on online before our next meeting? Strictly talking about the level of priority. Are we allowed to use this kind of as a working document to comment back and forth?
So I
Does that
don't
have to be public.
Yeah, I don't believe you can comment back and forth and I don't believe you can share your thoughts with each other through this document.
Okay.
Yeah, that type of stuff, because that kind of gets into deliberation. So
Sure.
really for that, the shared file that we have should really be information only. So it's like files that people can all look at, but the file shouldn't be, they can't be changing based on people's input, unfortunately.
Okay, so maybe that's kind of our homework in between, is to look at this and come with some suggestions first thing at the next meeting to help us prioritize.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask if we could provide those to the chair and vice chair. So, and then we could deliberate in the next, so at least we have a comprehensive overview of what additional action items may be as a part of this document, and then we can deliberate. And then the next step being developing leads to support and drive these separate initiatives.
I think so, Mary. Yeah.
You can definitely provide your comments to Cassie. So there's never a problem with providing comments to staff. And it's okay, like one-on-one. It's when a quorum of you starts to share. The problem with doing it with the chair and the vice chair is if it gets to be like serial and then they pass on to anyone else outside of a public meeting, that can be an issue under the Meetings Act. If it's just to the chair and vice chair and they don't pass it on to anyone, and then you talk about it at the next meeting, that's okay.
So Mary, maybe if we just copied sort of the first couple rows and we input our own information, and then we just emailed that to the chair and vice chair, and then they could consolidate all of that feedback into a single doc that we would then talk about in the next meeting.
Yeah, you could do that. I would say make sure you copy Cassie as well.
Okay, so Tess, go ahead.
Sorry, just because it sounded like a little bit of a next step, I just wanted to clarify maybe what Kelly suggested. Kelly, are you suggesting kind of adding in data rows below those columns that Cassie already laid out? Are you suggesting adding different criteria by which we would prioritize in the future, which would be columns instead of rows?
Yeah, good question. I guess I would say one and the same, but to make it easier for the chair and the vice chair, that you sort of, if you're going to add columns, that you highlight what additions you've made, so it's very clear for them. And if you're just adding rows, which would be new actions, that you sort of start on a blank slate. So maybe it's 2 tabs, one for rows, and this secondary tab being if you want to add columns to it. And that way it's just clean and clear for them as they consolidate our feedback.
Thanks.
Would it be adding, just so I'm clear, is that you'd like to, because I've heard a little bit about coming up with prioritization criteria kind of in general. So is it that, or is it like kind of commenting on particular things about each action?
It's sort of adding to. I don't think at this point, if it's not a comprehensive list, it would be difficult to prioritize. So that would be maybe the next step after deliberation, that we could begin that prioritization process.
Okay, like other columns that you'd like information for all the strategies on?
Yeah, and if there are additional actions that you think should be taken that aren't captured in the existing document.
And I'm not sure for the CCAP, we can add like new actions because this was the adopted CCAP. Okay. So yeah, I think unfortunately, and that's not to say, since this committee has a broader environmental focus, that's not to say that you can't propose other types of climate related actions to the council. But as far as this particular body of work is moving forward with the CCAP, I think we would just need to distinguish between what's been adopted as part of the CCAP and what's like a new thing that the committee is proposing.
Got it. So no, not limiting, but making sure we differentiate between those two.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So we're about at time. So I want to make sure everyone I want to honor the time. So I think we have some good thoughts for the next agenda, which I think is a discussion on the prioritization and maybe a discussion on what's maybe what's missing, other things you guys want to be talking about as the ECC in general, maybe. So send your thoughts to the chair and vice chair using either, you can use this matrix and add to it like Kelly suggested. If you want to send an email about what your top prioritization are, you can just send that in a separate email. I'll talk with Serena and Neil after maybe sometime next week. So maybe we can follow up with an email to you all if we're looking for more specific input than that, if that sounds good to everybody. Okay. Well, congrats on selecting a chair and a vice chair. I think this was a really big step to getting the committee moving forward and doing, starting to get into the exciting, really concrete work. So would anyone like to move to adjourn?
I just want to thank Neil and Serena for being willing to do this. Before I say that, and then I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second and thank you and congratulations.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your week.
Take care.
Good to know, guys.
Thanks, everybody.